Harvest Bank is a proud sponsor for today's Fresco El Podcast.
Welcome back to Fresco El Podcast. I'm Luis Padilla, and today I'm excited to have a very special guest, Councilman Crispin Rea. Crispin is not just a dedicated public servant, but also someone deeply committed to drive positive change in our community. We're going to learn more about his story, his political journey, and his vision for the Latino community in Kansas City. But before we dive into all that and the full episode, Crispin, thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm doing well. A couple days before Thanksgiving. I'm ready to put down some food.
Yep.
So I'm good.
What's been keeping you busy lately?
I'm about a year and a couple months into my first term on city council. That's been keeping us busy. We've been working a lot on economic development projects, important investments in the community, and so that's been keeping me busy. I've got a little one who's a toddler now, and he probably keeps me more busy than city council because he's walking and running everywhere and getting into everything and climbing over everything. But we've also got another little one on the way, another little boy due in March. So being a dad is also keeping me very busy, and a husband, of course.
Yeah, a full-time job.
Yeah.
But we have, like you say, we recording this before Thanksgiving, probably airs after that. But are you big on festivities and decorating, you and Emma and the family, or?
Yeah, I love holidays. I love to celebrate holidays to the fullest. I have good memories of holidays, and my parents always seem to make things special on a very meager budget. And so now that we've got a family and we've got little ones, I want to make very good holiday memories for him. And so I've always loved Thanksgiving. It's always been one of my favorite holidays. I'm a big football guy. I'm a big turkey guy, and you put those two together, I don't know if it could get any better than that.
Yeah. So you get together with families and have a big dinner and stuff?
Yeah, so we're hosting. I'm cooking the turkey.
Nice.
And I think we'll have about 18 or 20 people over to our house.
Nice, cool. So, I mean, this is a weird question, but not weird, but like something that of like, if you can invite any three personalities or persons to dinner, alive or from history, who would that be?
Let's see. Well, I'd have to start with Barack Obama. And you invite Barack, you got to invite Michelle, which I would probably invite Michelle and then ask her to bring Barack Obama. I met Michelle Obama in 2007, before the 2008 election. And, as someone who was in the early 20s at the time, everything that Barack Obama represented and what he stood for was a big piece of me, continuing to stay involved in politics. And so certainly those two. And then, I'd have to invite Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
I know I'm not going very far back in history, but, these are folks that are very relevant today. And
right.
I'd have to invite Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. And one more?
Oh, so Barack and Michelle count as the two.
Oh, yeah. That's a
I'll
couple.
Squeeze in
So
one
yeah,
more.
yeah. We will. they will ask for a plus one. So
Okay. I'd keep it in theme. I think it'd be pretty cool to say I served turkey to Taylor Swift. She's the most famous woman in the world, and she could bring Travis Kelce with her.
Yeah. So those are very good three guests that to have. So let's go back to the beginning. Where you from Kansas City, but tell us about your childhood and where you grew up.
Yeah. So I was born and raised on the east side. Blue Valley is the neighborhood. It's a neighborhood that experienced a lot of challenges, a lot of disinvestment. If you score the neighborhood on any of the indexes or metrics, the CDC has an economic distress index. The census has an economic vulnerability metric. All these tools intended to tell you, what the opportunities are in a neighborhood. It's a neighborhood that would always score at the highest, most at risk level. There was a point growing up where out of all the homes on our block, we were the only home that actually had a family living in it. The rest were vacant, and crime, drugs, the whole thing. And most of that neighborhood is now in my council district now, which was not the case very long ago. The line changed actually midway through my election, and so I realized that I had an opportunity to represent the neighborhood that made and molded me. My dad still lives in the house that I grew up in, and so it's a neighborhood that's very near and dear to my heart. But that's a neighborhood I grew up in. My mom was very active in the neighborhood association, trying to work with others to make it cleaner and safer. And ultimately, it was her example that set me on this trajectory.
So, what's because I was gonna ask you about your parents and the work that they did or they done. But what's your favorite memory of growing up in the East Side?
It's hard to pick one. What immediately comes to mind is 4th of July's. If anyone who's lived in the East Side or in the Northeast, it gets very active for the 4th of July. There were a lot of kids in my neighborhood, and we hung out all the time. A lot of childhood friendships, from those days. And so we always just had really good 4th of Julys. We had a basketball goal in the backyard, and so for our block, it was a place where most of the kids in the neighborhood would come and play basketball, and we'd play all night. But those are some good memories.
Yeah, and so you mentioned your parents. Can you tell us a little bit more about them? I know.
Yeah. So both of them grew up on the West Side. My mom was one of 8, and my dad is one of 4. My mom, neither one of them went to college. I was first in my family to even step foot on a college campus. But my mom worked for Link, the local investment commission. They provide a lot of before and after school programming in inner city schools, and there was an elementary school right around the corner from us called McCoy Elementary that she used to work at and provide services for other low-income families in the neighborhood. And then my dad, he worked for the United States Postal Service for 36 years. He essentially drove a forklift moving mail around at the bulk mail center over on the Kansas side. Long-time union member, and it's that job and those benefits that ultimately, gave us a chance. I was lucky enough to have both parents in the home. I was lucky enough to have a home that we lived in for, my childhood. We were not forced to move from house to house every year or when the rent was up or anything like that. And it's because of his union job providing that stability.
Right. And so I'm guessing that both of your parents are big role models for you, and did they shape you? Did they influence? They were the big influence on your journey and becoming a politician.
Yeah. At least getting into public service, whether elected or not. Like I said, my mom set an example very early on. Even if I didn't embrace it at the time, I wanted to appear tough in front of my friends, but yet she would have me out there picking up trash with her up and down the street. I just tell them I'm doing community service or something. But that the example she set was something that imprinted on my soul very deeply. She passed away in 2010, and left a lot of work unfinished and things that she wanted to see in the neighborhood. And so I've always, held it as a personal goal of mine to return to that and try and make that neighborhood better. And then my dad as well. I mean, he just worked and worked and worked. Speaking of Thanksgivings, I mean, I have memories of Thanksgivings when he worked, and we had dinner later in the evening after he got home from work. He worked weekends and evenings and holidays. And it was all just so we, could have a chance. So I could sit here in front of you today with the opportunities that I have. He didn't complain. He didn't. He'd be grumpy sometimes. He didn't get upset about having to work that hard. It was all about providing for us, and I saw that at a very early age.
Right, giving opportunities like you mentioned, and you mentioned also being the first one to go to college, and I know you went to Park University
For undergrad, yeah.
For undergrad, yes, and you have a athletic scholarship, is that right?
Yeah, so I was recruited and ran cross country and track for 3 years at Park University on an athletic scholarship. My third year, we actually made it to a national championship, which
nice.
was very cool to be a part of that that experience and that team. So I spent a lot of time running up in Parkville. Obviously, we trained on campus and ran through the neighborhoods and the woods up there, and it was a great experience.
So yeah, it's funny because I was gonna go to Park back in the day, but and it was gonna be a athletic scholarship, soccer scholarship, but I for some reason didn't work out and stuff. But I know Park. So growing up, you did cross country, or you have what other sports? I know you like baseball a lot. So
I played baseball all through T-ball up until the 8th grade, and then in high school, cross countries in the fall, track is in the spring, so they get 2 sports out of you that way. I grew up really into boxing, never competed professionally or anything like that, but I was a big NBA fan, college basketball and football fan. I was raised to be a big Mizzou fan, and so of course college basketball and football were big sports that I followed. But then when I got to high school and college, all I had time for was cross country and track. You're training year round, and so I might have played basketball in high school for a year or two, but nothing meaningful.
This boxing, you like boxing because your family will get together and watch all these fights.
Yeah, I mean,
back in the day with Julio Cesar Chavez.
You can't be Latino or Mexican American and not grow up with those legends being a big part of your experience. Boxing is such a special sport to us, that we have such a long history. Any point in time there's a Mexican great, a champion, whether they're Mexican American like Oscar De La Hoya or someone like Canelo, who is not an American citizen or resident, and it's such a beautiful history. I love that in September and in May around Independence Day and Cinco de Mayo, those are Mexican boxing holidays.
Yeah. I asked because I grew up and also it was pretty similar. It was like grew up with all my uncles and my family getting together to watch Julio Cesar Chavez or sometimes Oscar De La Hoya, but Oscar De La Hoya was kind of like the enemy of Julio, the one that sent him to retirement. But those nights are fun. And now with Canelo, you a big Canelo fan?
Yeah, I love Canelo. I love everything he represents about the sport. He takes his craft very seriously. It took him a long time to warm up and do media events. I mean, he resisted, learning English for the longest time, at least sufficient enough to, do long interviews and your promoters are always going to tell you need to, box first, promote second, and do everything you can to sell yourself and your fights. And for the longest time, his record and his skill sold his fights. I mean, I think he got a little more business savvy, but he never lost the core of who he was, and I think he's done amazing things for our sport. I mean, he is the Mexican great of our time right now, and I don't know who comes after him, but it's been very, very fun to watch his career.
I agree. I think a lot of people sometimes get against him because he can come as a how can I say it? Not very not very likable or something like that. But man, I mean, it's like you need to, he's great, right? As a Mexican, as an athlete, we need to recognize that it's hard to be the number one in the world, so all his hard work and his mentality. I'm always a big fan of athletes that more than obviously he has talent, but the mentality of being so disciplined and, like you say, taking it so serious, that I think we all need to admire that and be like, yeah, okay, well, I don't like what you say on the media, but I respect what you do on the boxing side, right? So but Canelo is huge in Mexico. But so you went to Park, you did your undergrad there. I know that after that you did UMKC law school, but between that, did you went straight after, or you start working somewhere, or like what happened just help us figure out that timeline.
Yeah, no, I had quite a gap. So I graduated undergrad in 2008. At the time, I was working in the mayor's office, not an internship, but an actual, paid staff position. And that was why I only ran for 3 years at Park. I gave up my fourth year of eligibility to work full time in the mayor's office. I was still finishing up, my coursework, and so I was literally drive in the middle of the day from City Hall back up to Park University for class and then come back. So I did that for my last year, and then shortly after that, I think I was in the mayor's office about a year and a half, 2 years. My mom passed away around that time. I left the mayor's office and began working at the Mattie Road Center and ran for a seat on the Kansas City School Board and was elected. So I worked at Mattie Roads for a couple years. My term on the school board was 4 years. But also during that time, while I was on the school board after I left the Mattie Road Center, I went back and got my master's in public administration from UMKC and then my law degree within that period of time. And so when I completed my term on the school board, I was also finishing law school and getting ready to take the bar exam. And so that was, I want to say roughly about 2014 or so. And graduated with my degrees, and my term was up on the school board, and shortly after that started working in the prosecutor's office as an assistant prosecuting attorney. And
I know you were the youngest member on the board.
I was, yeah.
And how old were you?
I was 24 going on 25.
Oh, wow.
I believe.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So, yeah, very young. I mean, you're still pretty young. How old are you?
I'm 39 now.
39? Well, we're young. We're young. So, yeah, I'm around there. So, but so you, okay, on the board and then on the mayor's office, and then you graduate and you did the Jackson County prosecutor's office. But at this point, where in life did you realize you wanted to be a public servant? I know that you say younger, and as a kid, seeing your mom and all the work that she was doing, but when do you realize and say, yes, this is what I want to do, I want to pursue this? It's
been an evolution and not necessarily a straightforward path. When I was working in the mayor's office, I mean, I was 21 or 22 years old, and my thought at the time was I would work in that office. I would, thought about running for school board, but I would just continue to try and climb from political office, to political office after showing that I could do a good job. And so, there was a point in time, certainly before that, when I was in college, and I was a political science major. And so I knew that I wanted to go into politics and elected office. After I completed my term on the school board, as I was finishing up law school, I decided to take a different route and staying in public service, but instead of going on the elected side, stepping back from that and serving as a prosecuting attorney. At that time, one of the things that evolved in my own experience was when I was working at the Mattie Road Center. This was before I went to law school, but knew I wanted to, wasn't quite sure what kind of law I wanted to practice. I had worked to create a program that was designed to provide support services for victims and families impacted by violent homicides and violent crime. And we created this program, and we launched it Memorial Day of May of 2010. And we had a little press conference. John Fierro, he likes to do his press conferences and press events. So we had a press deal, and the dignitaries came out, and the program was like I said, designed to tell families who were impacted by violent crime, specifically in the West Side and in the Northeast and the East Side, that we were there to help. Mental health services, financial services, whatever you might encounter if you find yourself in that unfortunate situation. So we launched the program on a Saturday, that Memorial Day weekend, and then just around 48 hours later, I was at my dad's house. We were barbecuing in the backyard for Memorial Day. It was that Monday, and we heard gunshots ring out a couple blocks away, and I got a call about an hour later from someone with Matty Rhodes telling me that we had our first family to help, not even 48 hours later. What happened was the victim was a young man named Juan Carlos Garcia. He was 17 years old at the time. He was incoming class president at East High School. He was a Kauffman Scholar, a National Honor Society Scholar. He'd been to Jeff City to lobby on immigration issues. He wanted to grow up and be a doctor. His family had immigrated here several years earlier when he was younger. And he got into an argument with one of the knuckleheads in the neighborhood, and that guy came back with some friends and shot him point blank in the back and in the chest in front of his little brother and little sister. And so as you can imagine, this family was dealing with a lot. So we met with them that day and provided services. The kid who had shot him was at large, and so they felt like their community didn't have their back. They felt like someone was hiding him or helping him hide. So we had a prayer vigil in the yard where we had 70 or so folks come and pray with them and be with them. Helped with the funeral expenses. We had a couple fundraisers with them, and then eventually the kid was caught, and so there was a whole legal process to navigate through the arrest and prosecution and conviction, and we helped them through that process. And it was around that time when I realized that if I'm gonna practice law, I want to do something good with it. And after seeing how their case was prosecuted and what it could do for them, I realized that I want to help families like that in our community, because there aren't a lot of prosecutors of color historically, and that's changing. But I wanted to be a voice for families like that.
So after that situation that happened, you stay with Matty Rhodes for a couple years, or for how long you stay in that program? Yeah,
that was probably about a year or so. We got the program started and handed it off to other staff as I was getting ready to go to law school. So in law school, they prohibit you from working your first year, and so I had to leave the job.
Yeah. And I believe, and I don't know if Alexis remembers, but I think Matty Rhodes still had that program. Mm-hmm. Together with the city, right?
Yeah. That first year, we had about 11 homicides in our community, a lot of them young men like Juan Carlos. We had a party that students at Northeast High School were hosting, where 2 of their classmates were killed that year. It was a tough year. Juan Carlos went to East High School, and we had some other youth programming. And so at the time, I was working very closely with their senior class and Juan Carlos's classmates. And these were kids that, they're very aware of what they have and what they don't have, and the resources that other high schools have. And when they were talking about their prom and the resources they had for their prom committee, they knew that they don't have a lot of resources. I was honored when they asked me to speak at their graduating class. This was for 2011, and these were kids who had been to more funerals of classmates than they had high school dances that year, and there were empty chairs on stage for them and for Juan Carlos, and these kids had been through a lot that year, but a number of them are doing very well and have gone on to do great things.
So you're still in contact with some of them?
Mostly through social media, and we'll message every once in a while.
Yeah.
Now these are, I say kids, they're in their early 30s probably at this point, and creating families and getting established.
Yeah, but so it's so important when somebody like you in a young age takes I would say like responsibility on helping others, in our community. And like you say, like a lot of the minorities, sometimes we don't have those resources, right? Or sometimes we don't know how to get those resources. And especially in difficult moments like this where a tragedy happens, you don't know who to ask for help. So I know that Mary Rose is still working on that program in the Northeast and the West Side, and right now with a lot of the things that happening not only in Kansas City, but the crime and all that kind of stuff I think it's key that we have these programs in our society.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you graduate and then you did the prosecutor office and keep helping other victims you did it for 7-8 years.
It feels a lot longer. So I interned in the office all 3 years of law school. More like 12 years actually being in the office, but as an actual prosecuting attorney, I served for just under 9 years, and I want to say about 7 of those years I was in the special victims unit. So the cases I prosecuted were, domestic violence, physical and sexual abuse against women and children. It was the majority of my caseload. So very difficult cases, very difficult subject material, very highly vulnerable victims, and complex fact patterns.
Yeah, I can imagine. How do you, like, what was obviously you dealing with all these difficult, like you say, cases and situations, but like, what was the biggest challenge? So how do you disconnect from, going to court and facing these people and the case and the victims and then going on your regular life?
Yeah, it's not easy. I joke that I'm a recovering prosecutor at this point in my life. It was a very difficult job. I think it will probably be the most difficult job I'll ever have, and certainly the most fulfilling, if not one of the most fulfilling. Trying cases is very, very challenging. That's in situations where you have cooperative victims and decent evidence you can rely on in a good case. That's not the majority of the time, but even in those situations where you have a number of those things, they're still very, very difficult. Like I said, the subject material is very heavy. I mean, they're just awful, awful things that people do to women and children. One thing an example I always give, so my wife works at KU Med. She's in the ENT department, so she does ear, nose, and throat medical care, and a lot of times surgeries, and gets in and operates and does something that I could not do, cutting people up and sewing them. It's messy, but they have objective set of standards and policies and procedures, and some of us might get emotional when they see blood, but in her profession they don't and they can't. And I compare the work that I did as a prosecutor very similar to that, where you have some very messy, sad, disgusting facts and situations that happen, but the law is the law. It's set, and your evidence, you can't change it, and it's simply a matter of applying your evidence to the law. And of course you can show emotion on behalf of your victims, in trial at a closing argument or something like that. But you just got to go in as a clinician and be very objective about how you handle your cases. And I think that kind of clinical approach always helped me navigate, some of that stuff. I mean, you can certainly compartmentalize difficult jobs from family life in an unhealthy way, where you don't want to talk about it and you don't want to address it. I found a good balance with compartmentalizing, as kind of taking a clinical approach where, we would have, my wife and I, very, very interesting dinner conversations at the end of the day when, I had just charged a child molestation case, and she had just, did a high-risk surgery, but you certainly carry some of that with you. But I mean, I was able to do it for 7 years, and there's pretty high turnover rate in that unit. But I feel like I came out of it in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, been dealing with all these cases. I have a friend that works or used to work at the Mexican consulate, and he was kind of like, he needed to visit all these people in jail, to kind of like review their cases and stuff like that. And he's like, yeah, it was a little bit crazy because you see, like you say, heavy things, heavy cases and stuff like that. And sometimes you need to, yes, for him, it was difficult to separate, like after the work, like bringing all these emotions and cases home and stuff like that. So I can imagine for you, for doing it 8-9 years. But so at that moment when you did it, like, so you decided, you're like, is that when you decided, hey, I'm gonna go into politics, I'm gonna run for, or how did that happen?
Yeah, we as the council elections were coming around, 3 years away, I had folks reaching out to me, some in our community asking if I would be interested or if I would consider it. Around that time, I'd been a prosecutor for a number of years, had felt like I had, personally and professionally accomplished enough to where I didn't feel like I was leaving something on the field. The job was very difficult, and so I was already exploring what the next step would be, whether that was going on to practice law somewhere or try and get back into politics. And so as my mind was already in that place, I had folks reaching out asking if I'd be interested in running for city council. We hadn't had a Latino elected since 1994 to the city council. I still paid very close attention to what was happening in our city, and public safety issues had gotten out of hand. We had experienced several years of very high homicide rates, and just some other issues that I was watching and observing. And, I felt like the time was right, and that for me personally, things had aligned, for me to be, to run successfully. And so I started having conversations with my wife about it. We somewhere in there, we went to on vacation to Puerto Rico and had a really nice time, but spent a lot of time talking about what the next chapter should look like. Coincidentally, I started watching all 7 seasons of The West Wing again, which is always inspirational. It always makes you feel like you want to go and change the world. And we were both watching it, and so I think we both got a dose of that inspiration. And I started having more serious conversations with folks about it and realized that there was a very good opportunity there. And so, I decided to do it.
Yeah, and the show was timing, or as you were thinking about it, you're like, you know what, I'm gonna watch the show and see, like, if that helps me decide.
I don't remember. I didn't intentionally, say let's start watching West Wing so that I could get inspiration. I think it was you go through your rotation of shows when there's nothing new on, and I feel like that one just came up. Like I said, it's always inspirational.
Right. And so for people that probably don't know, and the younger people or just anybody, but like, how does that work? So like they like people start reaching out to you, telling you, hey, there's this opportunity, would you be interested? But once you say yes, what's the next step? Or how do they prepare you? I mean, is there a school to go, like you take a class, or like, how does that work to be
I mean, there's no how-to manual, there's no, instruction booklet or anything like that. I had still been pretty plugged in and had maintained relationships and connections with a lot of folks who were politically active. And so, I started with talking to, mentors that were still people in my life. I mentioned John Fierro earlier. John has been a longtime mentor. Carlos Gomez with the Hispanic Chamber, he has been a longtime mentor and someone who has been there for me throughout, professional changes and different jobs. Renato Ruiz, who passed away a couple years ago and had worked in Congressman Cleaver's office for years, was also someone who had been a longtime mentor. And so, you start those conversations with your family and close friends, and you bring in your mentors and the people who have had your back, and you start to build, the team of folks that are going to help you out. The consultants who ran my campaign are folks that are actually good friends of ours. Phil Scaglia, who's Congressman Cleaver's political consultant, and Mindy Brissy, who is now regional administrator for the Small Business Administration, appointed by President Biden, I want to say about 2 years ago. They have a consulting firm, and I had known them for years, and so when I reached out, we talked about it and evaluated the landscape and what it would take, and we just built around that. You hire your campaign folks that are going to build your campaign, and you build it with them.
Right. Yeah, and then in this podcast and multiple episodes, we have talked about the importance of having mentors, and how sometimes like the Latino community or younger people, they don't know how to reach out to mentors and what a mentor is, and actually in the last couple episodes, John Fierro was here, and like we talk, even him, like he say how important in his career has been to have other people that he can go and ask for opinions or like advice, and I'm sure for you it was the same, right? Like having all these people around you, like you mentioned it.
Yeah. We've got that generation of leader. Most of them are either executive directors of social service agencies or on the business side. These are folks who care deeply about helping the next generation out. And I think there are just so many examples of that. Our community gets a bad reputation sometimes for not wanting to work together, not wanting to help each other out. They tell us we're crabs in a bucket, and as soon as someone's trying to climb out, we all pull them back in. I don't think that's a stereotype that applies anymore. Certainly not everyone gets along on every issue, but I think that's one thing that's great about our community at this moment in time right now, is that we have so many folks in leadership roles, yourself included, that are investing in the next generation to have even greater opportunities than we had.
I agree with that. I think at this point in Kansas City, I see the Latino generation, like the Latino community, as we're collaborating more than ever. Well, that's how I feel, right? Like I haven't been here for that many years, but I feel like all these agencies and organizations, business, now that we have political elected officials, and so I think there is a big sense and vibe of collaborating and helping each other. But that I was going to ask you, how do you envision the next generation of leaders, Latino leaders in Kansas City?
We have a lot of, and by next generation, I include people our age, who are
very young
and still have a lot of room to grow, right?
Right.
I mean, we haven't even hit our stride yet, No. And so I see, incredible potential. You have so many folks that are rising in their professions across the board. And I think it is a very promising time. We just had a reception. I hosted a reception a couple of weeks ago in honor of two Latino department directors at the city. These department director positions are important. I mean, they serve directly under the city manager. They oversee hundreds, if not thousands, of employees and services that are very important to people in Kansas City. And to be a department director, you've got to rise through the ranks and have strong credentials. And the status quo has been that we don't have that representation at the city level. When I worked in the mayor's office, out of the 4,500 employees, only 184 were Latino, and you did not have any elected official. You did not have department directors, city managers, high-ranking staff in either of those offices. I was an employee in the mayor's office at the time, and I hate to say it, but I think I might have been one of the highest-ranking, Latino employees at the time for the city as a kid in my early 20s, who hadn't proven myself or established myself that way. And I never forgot that at the time. But now we have two incredible department directors, Mario Vasquez who's the director of the city planning department, which is a big deal. And then Jaime Guillen, who's over the CREO office, which is our equivalent of human relations. I think at most throughout the city's history, we've been lucky to have one Latino department director. Usually there are none, and there's never been more than one. So I keep saying this, but I feel like we are in the early stages of a renaissance for our Latino community in Kansas City.
Yeah, I feel the same, and I'm excited about it. I think now it's you, like you say, we can see that more Latinos are getting in different positions that are helping the community to grow. So what advice would you give to Latinos that want to get into public service or politics, to young Latinos?
I think there are a couple things, and I'm one of those people that I'm stubborn, and so I tend to learn things the harder way. You still learn the lesson in the end, but so I always try and share some of that information, especially with people wanting to go to law school or run for office. I think that what I'd say to a lot of young folks right now is that your community needs you, your family needs you, your kids need you. They're for any Latino or anyone who is successful and ambitious, there is a group of people around them, watching them, rooting for them, hoping they make it. And I think both of us had that in our lives and still do. I mean, there are folks who are looking up to us or looking to us to be successful, and with that responsibility comes the burden of doing good work and being ethical and being honest and demonstrating good character. And so what I would say to folks in our community is just know that people are watching you and depending on you, and that feels like a burden, but it's also an incredible opportunity to change lives. And it's easy to want to go a different direction. Certainly a lot more money to be made in the private sector, and no matter what profession you're looking at, but the altruistic benefits of helping people and making life better is intangible. You can't put a dollar figure on that.
Yeah, I agree. And it's crazy because like we're in Fresco, we're like on the private, right? It's like a business. But I have mentioned this throughout life, I have so many people helping me, and either when I came to the United States and to school, or graduate after start working and getting a scholarship, all that kind of stuff. That I just feel like you need to give back to the community. Like you cannot just take everything for and don't care about the community, right? Or don't care about helping others. I feel like in whatever industry you are or whatever you're doing, there's always room to help and to give back. Either if it's donations or time or whatever it is, even connecting people, like if you cannot help somebody directly, you can connect it to somebody that maybe that person can help. We always feel it's weird because sometimes some people think that Fresco is a non-for-profit, but so sometimes like with different programs or different things that we're doing, but I feel like for us it's very important just to continue to actually do the work that we're doing and as a business and pay our bills and stuff, but also having in consideration that we can keep helping and try to help others as we can. But and I agree that, like you say, like there's so many people out there that they're willing to help you. Like if you whatever, like if you're young out of school, or you don't know what you want to do, or you want to explore, or you have a question, you can go to all these different, to yourself or to John or to Carlos, Beto, all these guys, and ask them for advice. So I know because you have your limited time, but if you have a superpower for a day and as a consummate, what would that be? What would be the first thing that you do?
On the city council side?
Yes.
I would wave a wand and make Kansas City the safest city in the United States. So I will say this year we are about 25% down from last year's homicides, which is good. It's a lot of folks who are not dying. But property crime and the impact it's had on our small businesses and residents, especially in high density areas. We're doing some pretty amazing things in Kansas City, and if we don't get these crime issues under control, we're going to undermine our own progress. And so that's what I would wave as my magic wand. We would solve our crime issues and make Kansas City the safest city in the United States.
Yeah, that's a very good superpower. So what's the most exciting thing that you think is happening in Kansas City right now? I mean, we have the World Cup coming up next year, in 2 years, but year and a half.
I mean, it's a number of things. The energy in Kansas City right now is amazing. I get to go to all these conferences out of town and hear, what folks outside of Kansas City think is happening in Kansas City. And you'll hear about, folks will talk about the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes and Super Bowl and Taylor Swift and all those things. But with each one of those things, you watch Monday Night Football and our landmarks are on every commercial break. Union Station, downtown, the Nelson. So people are millions of people are seeing, images of Kansas City, and deciding to choose Kansas City to do business, to come for conferences, to come and visit, and maybe even move here and not just visit. And so we've got this incredible energy, and we've got the World Cup on the horizon. I think the important question is, what do we do after the World Cup, and how do we leverage this momentum to continue to take us to the next level? I think it's easy to look at 2026 when the World Cup is going to be here and see that as the end of history. We just need to get there, and that'll be the biggest thing that ever happens, when really it should be the biggest opportunity, the greatest launching pad to carry us to the next level. And so I think we need to figure out what that's going to look like while we are, planning for what's going to be the biggest event any of us have ever experienced here in Kansas City. We're making major investments across the board, major investments in Westport, in downtown, in the West Side. I'm very excited about the work we've been doing in the West Side, in Midtown neighborhoods, basic stuff that are important to folks, like sidewalks and streets and crosswalks, and just the basic things that leaders sometimes take for advantage, but neighborhood folks actually really, really like. These basic city services. These are things that no one else does, that the city is supposed to do.
Yeah, and recently, I mean, you were a key element to all the new plan on the new project that's coming to the West Side and Southwest Boulevard. So you announced, I believe it's $2 million for improvements.
It'll be more than $2 million when you calculate the money for resurfacing, but it is a full-blown transportation plan that the community worked on, and you all did great work on that for months. But it's going to be greener, shadier, slower, more pedestrian friendly, and more vibrant on Southwest Boulevard, and the section from Broadway to 25th Street is going to be done by the World Cup. And so I'm very excited about that investment. I mean, the city has not invested in Southwest Boulevard in decades. Mm-hmm. And you look at the downtown loop, which is our economic engine. It's our financial center. It's our government center. It's our business center. But you have a number of great neighborhoods that surround downtown that we've invested in that are growing. The West Side has done it in spite of a lot of support from the city. You look at Crossroads, River Market, Columbus Park, all the money and investment we're putting into the West Bottoms, and then Riverfront, Berkeley area where the Casey Current Stadium is. So you have this ring of neighborhoods around downtown that are easily accessible for people when they visit Kansas City, and the West Side is certainly one of those. And so, when I look at what the major investments are in those other neighborhoods, and I look at what we're doing on the West Side, we've got to be investing, as intentionally. And the Southwest Boulevard project gives us that opportunity.
Right. Yeah. And I know people's very excited about that. So thank you for all your work. Oh, yeah. But so you mentioned all these neighborhoods and cool areas in Kansas City. So what's your favorite? Like what's the perfect weekend in Kansas City for Crispin Rea?
Let's see. Yeah, I think starting off Friday, with the first Fridays in Crossroads and in the West Side, maybe find somewhere to get some barbecue in there. Well, I won't say a favorite, but I had LC's this weekend, and I really enjoy LC's barbecue, but everyone's got their favorite. Saturday, if you've got good weather, you certainly, gonna want to enjoy some of our beautiful parks, which we have so many of around town. Maybe catch a concert or something at the Performing Arts Center, and then, Chiefs game on Sunday. You can't go wrong with the day-long tailgate at Arrowhead.
Yeah, that sounds like a perfect weekend. So, and so you say barbecue. Was barbecue your favorite food?
I really like Italian food. I love Italian food. But yeah, I'd say barbecue is either a first or close second.
Yeah.
Of course, I love Mexican food, but
Right. So you like the Chiefs more than the Royals? Well, not as a I mean, football more than baseball, not as a team. Yes. I know you love both, and I'm not. I'd say I'm not gonna ask those questions now.
It's interesting. I'm probably more of a football fan than a baseball fan, in that I follow NFL more than MLB.
Yeah.
I've always been a big baseball fan, and I will say, the Super Bowl run has been amazing, but man, it's hard to top 2014 and 2015 when the Royals were in back-to-back playoffs and World Series. I mean, just those 2 Octobers. I mean, the city shut down. It was the only word I could use to describe it was magic. There was something very magical about that time in Kansas City, and I haven't seen anything that can quite top that.
Yeah, even this season, even we didn't get that far, but we get to the playoffs, and the energy in the city was just different. I don't know, I experienced it in 2015, but I was pretty new to the city, so I didn't kind of knew the whole, the story behind and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But I feel like this season, you can just see and feel the energy and with the Royals, getting to the playoffs. So
and there's something that's uniquely captivating about playoff baseball. Every swing, every pitch, every at bat, matters, and something big can happen, at every pitch, every at bat, and you feel like you're just waiting for it. You're waiting for it, and that's in one game. You repeat that over several weeks, game after game. There's just something about it that is very captivating, and I don't know what else in professional sports can really top it. I mean, boxing is my favorite sport. And I love the build up to fights. I love the speculation after a fight about who's going to fight who next. You go a full 12 rounds and it's a great fight, but man, it's just hard to beat, what we experienced in those Octobers. Yeah.
And I'm not going to lie. I think you mentioned that to me before watching the Royals. And after that, I see the games differently. After that, you told me that, hey, every pitch, every hit matters now in the playoffs, because before you have 120 something games, right? 180.
Yes. Yeah, too many. So they should make the season shorter. But.
Yeah. And so you feel like, oh, well, they'll win the next one, right? Yeah. But in the playoffs, it's and you mentioned that to me, and I was like, you know what, it makes sense. Now I'm paying attention to every single play.
Yeah.
But
it was fun this season. I watched a lot of. In 2014, I watched most games at Westport Flea Market, and so of course I felt like I had to go back there, just being a superstitious person, you know. But it was a fun ride, and man, I think this team has what it takes to make a run next year, and it, from all indications right now, ownership and management are willing to make the deals to keep the folks we need and get the folks we need to get us there.
Yeah, I'm excited. So, and we have a very young he's not a promise anymore. I mean, Bobby White Jr., he's a superstar.
He's the future of the sport.
Yep.
And we've got him locked in for a decade. He proved himself this season. He got everyone's attention, and I think he has a lot of room to grow.
And so this question, I talk to other people, but I'm gonna take so obviously sports and having the Royals and having obviously the Chiefs have a big impact on how Kansas City has grown and all that. But do you think that it's kind of like what's first, right? The chicken or the egg? It's kind of like, you think that Kansas City was already in a trajectory of like growing and a lot of development, and or you think that definitely having a winner, a team that's winning, it has helped bringing that attention to the city that brings money?
Yeah. I think it's important for a city that wants to be a major league city to have major league sports teams. And, you know, in a city like Kansas City, where we have such an intimate connection with our sports teams, you know, win or lose, you know, it is very important and a top priority to make sure we keep our teams here. It's a complex situation. You know, despite the sales tax issue that you know, did not pass several months ago, I think the vast majority of Kansas Cityans want us as elected officials to do what we can to keep those teams here. And I think the question is, doing what we can, is that going to be enough? And I think it should be. And you know, there have been ongoing conversations about how we do that. They generate a number of tangible benefits in the form of tax revenue generation that we are then able to take and use to do more sidewalks in the Northland, or potholes after, you know, the sun melts. But there's also an intangible factor there about what it means for a city. And you know, you look at even since 2014, there's been a special time in Kansas City. A lot of that has been driven by success on the football field, on the baseball field, on the soccer pitch, and you know, we don't want to lose that.
Right. Yeah. And Kansas City has such a pride in the city, right? Like, 'cause you go to other cities and you don't see Tampa everywhere, right?
Yeah.
you see Kansas City.
It's the one city that I feel I've been to where everyone from that city wears Kansas City stuff.
Right.
You know, you don't go to New York and see everyone from New York wearing those I Love New York shirts.
Right.
But you come to Kansas City and you see everyone wearing that shirt with the heart and the KC in it.
Yep.
You know, it's funny, but I think it's special.
Yeah, it is special. So what's in your bucket list?
Just in general?
In general, what's
you know, travel. You know, my wife and I, we traveled quite a bit. Certainly before the pandemic, and
right.
then when things calmed down, you know, we resumed travel. We've, like I said, I have a toddler. He's a little over a year and a half now, and we've traveled a little bit with him, but he's getting to that age where it's going to be very difficult to keep him chill on a plane. I mean, we're going to be flying out to California after Christmas, and we'll see how it goes. But I'd say a lot of my bucket list items are places in the world that I want to go to, that I haven't had a chance to. You know, I'd love to go to Morocco. That's very high on the list. I have a good friend who lives in Spain, and you know, it's a very short flight or a somewhat short ferry ride away.
right.
Yeah, I really want to go to Africa. I'd love to go to Botswana or South Africa. Australia's on the list. There's too many places in the world.
Yeah.
I want to see them all.
Yeah, same. I like to travel too, and I wanna see many places, but yeah, once at a time, right?
Yeah.
We'll get there. But to finalize this episode, if you can go back on time and see Crispin at a very young age of 10, 12, 15, with everything that you know now, what would you tell him?
You know, I would say don't think the path has to be completely linear. You know, when I was in you know, that phase in my life in college and thinking about going into politics and in the mayor's office, you know, I thought everything needed to be linear and accomplished by this point in my life. And then life happened, as it does, and I'm better for it. And I ended up not far off of where I would have been otherwise. And so, you know, I think, especially for ambitious folks and folks who want to accomplish big things and important things and good things for others, you know, it's easy to lock into that mindset that, you know, this has to be linear, that you have to have this path forward, when In reality, that is not the case at all. And I would probably go further back than just Crispin in his 20s. I'd probably go back to me as a kid at some point and share that information.
Yeah, very important advice. You know, like life doesn't happen as we plan, and sometimes things happen that take us to a different route. But at the end of the day, I think dedication, hard work is gonna put you in the right place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure to learn more about your story and everything that you're doing, and thank you for everything you're doing for our community. Councilman Rea, the first Latino councilman in the last 3 decades in Kansas City.
So we have 2 on the city council now with Jonathan
Yes,
Duncan
with
in the 6th
Jonathan
district.
Duncan.
But we had not had that representation since 1994.
1994, yes. So, and I look forward to your career and what else you can do in the future for our community. And I know you've been very, very involved in our community, helping everywhere that you can. So, we all thank you for that. And like I said, I look forward to keep helping you and to keep seeing you where your career takes you. And so I don't know if you have one last thought or anything that you want to share with us.
No, I just hope everyone has a good Thanksgiving. I'm looking forward to it. I'm making the turkey. I've got a little bit of experience at this point. Doing it. So just hope everyone has a good holiday and gets some time to relax and spend time with family and friends.
Yeah, same. So, all right. Well, thank you guys for watching. I hope that you enjoy knowing a little bit more about Councilman Crispin Rea. And I'll see you the next episode. Thank you.
Arvest Bank is a proud sponsor for today's Fresco El Podcast.